I woke to my phone buzzing on the nightstand and a voice saying my name, but the lock screen still read, "Do not disturb." The window was shut, the blinds drawn, and every light in the house was off. Somebody in my bedroom was breathing the exact pattern I breathe when I sleep. I sat up and whispered, "Who are you?" The answer was a laugh that sounded like me. I moved back into the little rental on Maple Street because of the quiet. Not the quaint, postcard kind of quiet, but the kind that presses flat like a hand over your ears. The sort of silence that lets every small noise become a thing. The landlord handed me the keys in broad daylight. Quiet neighborhood, history's clean, utilities included. I smiled and nodded and put the keys in my pocket, trying to believe it. The house looked tired but intact. Narrow porch, sagging shutters, a rusted mailbox that still had old newspapers stuck in it. I spent the first week unpacking in the half-light of October, boxes of books stacked like small towers. At night I left the house to the street lamp and the hum of my fridge, and for the first few nights, that was fine. I liked the way the house creaked, the way the pipes tuned themselves at 3 in the morning. It made it feel alive, domestic even. On the 10th night, the phone woke me. It was 3 in the morning, the hour when shadows articulate. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a call with no number, the screen asleep. The buzzing stopped, and then a thread of static resolved into a voice I knew like a bruise. "Hey," it said, and right then my chest nodded because that voice was the one I used when I spoke to myself in the shower, when I rehearsed monologues in the mirror. I slid out of bed, heart skittering like a loose coin. There are small things you tell yourself in a crisis. Check the doors. Check your phone for message history. Check the locks. I did those things because panic has its protocol. My phone showed nothing. No missed calls. No message thread. My call log was clean. The lock screen still read, "Do not disturb." I checked the hallway, then the kitchen, with a flashlight app that left the world thin and hard at the edges. Nobody. Nothing. Only the house giving itself away in tiny, domestic betrayals. A glass marker clacked under the sink like a dry cough. The radiator breathed. I went back to bed and told myself it was a prank. Someone in town with a cruel sense of humor. But the voice had ended with a whisper that threaded along my ear like cool smoke. "I'm here." I started keeping the lights on. For the first few days that helped. I told myself that keeping company with the lamp was a rational act. I told myself that shavings of tiredness could give a felt sense of presence that wasn't there. When you move into a house, you expect it to come with its quirks. A squeaky floorboard, a bent stair. You don't expect it to come with mimicry. 2 nights later, when I reached for a glass of water in the kitchen, the radio crackled to life. Not with music. It began with my voicemail greeting, the exact phrasing I had recorded 3 months earlier, clipped and sleepy. "Hey, you've reached me. Leave a message." The speaker then played 3 tiny seconds of silence, and the static settled back down. My hand went cold on the glass. I stared at the radio. The clock said 2:11 a.m. I had unplugged that old clock radio, the one my neighbor had given me. I knew the kitchen. I knew the cords. I knew the dead end of an unplugged cable. I checked the outlet. Nothing. I remember thinking with a clarity that seemed cruel, that the world had become a place where my voice was a key and someone else had it. Who had my voice on the other end of the line? I held the question for 3 days like I held a hot, unfamiliar object, careful not to drop it, careful not to burn the skin of my daily life. I combed through my phone settings. I called my provider. They checked and said there was no sign of spoofing on their end, no backdoor. "Phones don't do this by themselves," the tech said kindly. "Something's accessing your account. Or someone's in the house." He insisted the latter with the same bland cadence as a man reciting safety protocol. I changed passwords. I set up 2-factor authentication. I replaced the deadbolt with a new one, one with a key that felt heavy and final. I taped up the vents as if the house could be sealed like an envelope. I slept in the living room with the TV on a low hum. Each time I dozed, the TV would flicker, and somewhere between image and noise a snippet would catch. My laugh slowed and stretched like taffy. My sigh taped and looped. My name pulled through a filter. Once it even played the exact 3-second voicemail greeting, as though the house could search the small library of my recorded sounds and loop what hurt most. I stopped telling friends. When I did tell one of them, she laughed nervously and said, "Maybe you're just exhausted, man." But exhaustion has edges, and mine had sharpened into small, precise moments of knowing, a familiarity with the sound of my breath, the rhythm of my heartbeat, the cadence of my phone alarm. Every time the house copied me correctly, it felt less like an imitator and more like a thief. On the fourth night after the first call, at 1:43 a.m., there was the soft click of wood settling. I sat up, listening as the sound moved along the hallway and stopped at my bedroom door. My bedroom door was closed. Whoever, whatever, had copied my voice used it like a stamp to test locks. The door clicked again. Then the frame creaked as if someone leaned their shoulder against it. I whispered, "Who is there?" And the voice answered in the tone I reserved for myself, patient, knowing, a little indulgent. "It's me," it said. "Let me in." My throat closed. The deadbolt was new and tight. I knew the lock. I also knew that a voice could turn a midnight into a negotiation. I swallowed down fear and tried the most ridiculous thing. I asked it what it wanted. The voice said, "You always talk in your sleep about the first thing, the thing you locked in the crawlspace when you were 19. Let me hear it." I remember a hot, pulpy memory like a thumbprint. A crawlspace under my old apartment floor. A box I shoved into the dark when I moved. I had told no one, not even myself, because some things are private by oxygen. The voice knew. It spoke of specifics, the brand of the box, the way I had used masking tape on one side, the torn sticker that said fragile, though nothing inside was fragile. I realized then that this wasn't mimicry for sport. It was leverage. Someone, or something, had recorded and indexed the contours of my voice and private words. It used that knowledge to get me to open doors I had closed. After that, I stopped trusting my own sound. I started to test the house in small, ridiculous ways. I hummed songs backward in the shower, heard nothing respond. I spoke in a tone I never used, and the house fell quiet. I left the recorder on my nightstand that night and played it back in the morning. Between hours of static, it had captured something else, a soft clump of footsteps like someone walking on the balls of their feet. Then a whisper, "Open up." The whisper wasn't quite my voice, but the cadence was mine the way a shadow is like a body. The next day, I went to the library and pulled out old town records. People love to talk about houses the way they talk about weather. The clerk gave me a look between pity and curiosity when I asked about Maple Street. There was one old article from 40 years ago. A missing person in the area had vanished from a house 2 blocks over. But there were no sensational details and nothing that tied my house to anything more than quiet domestic slips. The town had a way of forgetting. People prefer tidy endings. That same afternoon, my landlord popped by with a lemon cake. He had that casual tone people use when they bring something to someone vulnerable, a tone that is supposed to reassure. He asked if everything was okay. I lied and said yes. He smiled and said, "Noise? Old houses talk. You'll get used to it." He lingered a moment too long, eyes scanning the hallway. He left with a wave and a comment about bills. I wondered if he heard the house too and was practiced in smoothing it into harmlessness. That night, the notifications began. They started as small icons on my phone, 3 new voicemails. A video I hadn't taken. A picture with no metadata, labeled with a timestamp from a room where I sat alone. I opened the video and watched myself asleep on the couch, mouth slightly open, blanket bunched at my knees. The camera angle was from the ceiling, a vantage point I'd never given anyone. The thumbnail showed the ceiling fan spinning, and the corner of the frame held something black and still. I scrubbed ahead and saw the blanket rise as if someone sat at my feet, then the blur of a hand, then a flash of a face turned away. I shoved the phone into the couch cushions like it could swallow the proof. I began to suspect I was being watched, not in the metaphorical way people talk about when they're nervous. This was a careful, private observation. The house had angles I didn't know how to survey. There were gaps behind the radiators, ventilation shafts that led to a crawlspace, the old attic door that had clearly been opened in decades past. Whoever had access didn't need to enter while I was awake. They had time. They had patience. And the house had patience too. How were they getting footage of me sleeping? I tore the house apart and found nothing. No cameras. No holes drilled into plaster. No suspicious wires under the rugs. I checked the smoke detectors and found the battery casing where the sensors sit manufactured no obvious surprises. I crawled into the attic with a flashlight and hit my head on rafters and imagined the worst. A nest of hidden glass eyes, a latticework of lenses like a hive. There was nothing but insulation and pigeon feathers. Then I realized cameras don't need lenses to spy. They need access to signals. My router had been reset. There was a new SSID on the network, a name that looked like a cheap attempt at personalization, home_ME. When I tried to log in, the admin page asked for a password I had never set. The router settings showed a list of devices connected, and among them, one without a recognizable name, labeled only by a string of numbers. It had elevated privileges and had been on for hours during times when I was asleep and the house was quiet. I unplugged the router and saw on the phone a file transfer notification still in progress, a video upload in the background tagged with the timestamp of a few minutes ago. I confronted my neighbor, an older woman with a lawn full of wind chimes. She told me, in a voice like soft gravel, that the neighborhood had been losing small things for years. A watch, a locket, a memory reported, and then shrugged out. Old houses get hungry, she said in the way people make folklore of anxiety. I wanted practical advice, not poetry. Instead, she handed me a steaming mug and said, if it knows how you talk, it knows where you hide the things you hide from yourself. I sat in the living room and returned my attention to the videos. The final clip on my phone, one I hadn't scrolled, to began with a timestamp. I recognized the exact minute I had fallen asleep the night before. The frame started at the edge of my bed and pulled back slowly, like someone learning the room around me. The last second was a face turned toward the camera, my face, still and drained of life, staring at the lens with an expression I hadn't worn since childhood. I vomited in the bathroom sink. They were using my router and network access to upload and stream footage, capturing me through devices or software I couldn't detect. The surveillance was networked rather than physically obvious. Whatever was watching me shifted tactics. It began to create not just evidence but questions, notes left in the folded edges of books. A paragraph scrawled on the back of a receipt in my own handwriting. You can't hide forever. I found the receipt in the Bible I kept in the bottom drawer. I haven't been religious since I faked an altar at 21, but I kept the book for its weight. The note's pen strokes imitated the way I pressed down at the tails of letters. The voice stopped being content with mimicking phrases. It started arranging my life into prompts. One morning, I found a small table in the narrow hallway where there had never been a table. On the top was a stopwatch, a photograph of my childhood backyard, a matchbook with a bar's logo I hadn't visited in years, and a single line written across the back of the photo, "Choose which you save." I stared at it for a long time. The words echoed like someone breathing in a different room. You will make decisions for yourself your whole life, what to take, what to leave, but when someone else forces the frame, the choice becomes a weapon. I called out into the empty house, "What is this?" My voice answered, "Options. You hate options, remember?" You always choose to close things. Now choose. I realized then I was in a game I had once played in late nights with friends. Truth or dare without the dare. The house had written the rules, and the rules were brutal. Pick a memory to lose, and it would delete evidence of another from my devices. Or pick a photograph and watch the counterpart vanish. I imagined the house as a gambler, stacking my life on the table and dealing cards one at a time. When I tried to destroy the stopwatch, it snapped in my hands and a small compartment popped open to reveal a key, tarnished and familiar. I recognized it instantly, the key to the old crawlspace I had sealed away years ago. It had been a secret heavy with silence. I had buried something under that floor as a kid and told myself it was a prank, a childish attempt at composting secrets. But the key in my hand was a promise and a dare. What was buried in the crawlspace that the house wanted me to open? I drove out to the old apartment where the crawlspace lived in my memory, the place I had occupied at 19 for a summer that smelled of cheap beer and paint thinner. I hadn't been back in years, and the unit had been gutted and renovated. I walked the perimeter anyway, fingers probing the dirt like a priest. The landlord there stared at my key with the same flatness people show when they dawn to want to be implicated. He asked if I'd like to see the old maintenance chart. I said no. I went home and stood over the hatch in the floor, the boards worn by 1,000 small steps. The key fit with an ease that made my skin crawl. The crawlspace opened like a mouth. Cold, dry air exhaled out. Inside, at the bottom, wrapped in plastic that had yellowed with time, was a small box, the same one I had shoved under the apartment when I was 19 and thought that secrecy could be an object. My hands shook. I expected bones, valuables, something that would make the scene make sense. Instead, inside the box was a cassette tape labeled in my handwriting, to SELF, do and open. Under the tape was a small Polaroid, folded, edges burned slightly. I sat on the floor and played the cassette in my old Walkman because old things demand old answers. The tape crackled, then hissed. Then my voice came out, younger and defiant and foolish. I listened to myself describe a night of lying, the lie being small then, like a seed that would grow. I had hidden something I called the decision, a thing I had done to protect someone else, or perhaps myself, and had never told anyone. I had sealed the memory in noise because sound can be a tomb. My younger voice told me that some things could not be undone. He asked me to forgive him for what he had done. The Polaroid, when I unfolded it, showed a doorway and a shadow. The shadow was not mine. In the corner of the frame, scribbled faintly, were the words, "You were chosen." My chest squeezed. For a second, I believed that everything could be explained by a youthful misdeed. I sat there with the Polaroid and the cassette and felt both lighter and heavier, as if the weight of what I'd hidden had been multiplied by a factor I couldn't calculate. The house was not just poking at my present. It was pointing fingers at a past I had walled off. The crawlspace held a recorded secret from my youth, a cassette and Polaroid tied to a decision I'd made at 19, something I'd tried to lock away. Whatever pulled my voice out of the dark wanted me to face that memory. After I opened the box, the game escalated. The house stopped being content to hint at the past and began sending me into the past. It would play back moments of me at 19 like movie reels, laughing with friends on a rooftop, furtive exchanges at bars, the exact night the decision had been made. Each clip ended with a message spelled in condensation on glass or written in dust. "Do you remember who you left behind?" I started having dreams that bled into my waking life. In my dreams, I'd sit across from myself at a diner and ask direct questions. The dream me always answered with a kind of cold honesty that the waking me struggled to wear. Sometimes I woke up with my hands sticky with syrup and could not tell if it had been real. One night, as the house hummed and the street outside breathed, my phone chimed with a single text from a contact I had listed as ME. "Do you want to remember or to forget?" I wrote back, fingers trembling, "Which will stop you?" The reply came almost instantly. Both. The house draws these binary diagrams on your life like an architect. It constructs choices that are all terrible and passes them off as crossroads. You begin to suspect that the game is not about punishment, but about curation, a careful cataloging of the parts of you you hide from everyone else. Each time I refused to play, something small and essential would vanish. A password, the last photo of my mother, a saved email with the subject line, "Do not delete." The house ate my backups. I felt without proof that the house wanted me to make a particular choice. It wanted me to dig out more and admit more, and in that way become something it could own and archive. It wanted me to be a complete file. I hated being visible. I had made my life that way, compartmentalized, tidy. The house didn't respect walls. It preferred to fold them flat and lay things open. If I confessed everything, would the house stop, or would confession only give it more? I considered confessing everything, the shamey ledger of choices I had tucked away. I thought about sending an email that detailed every small wrong, hitting send, and then watching the house either devour it or dissolve. I thought about walking to the police and handing them the cassette and the Polaroid and the list of things that felt like guilt. I kept imagining a room of officers in neutral lighting, filing the evidence into a file and closing it. But closure, I was beginning to see, is a human construction. This thing did not abide by our administrative comforts. Instead, I preempted the house. I made my own admission list, a paper with my handwriting on it, folded carefully and left on the kitchen table. I wrote everything I could remember, from the petty to the monstrous. I left it for myself like an offering and a test. If the house took it, then at least the stealing would be acknowledged. That night, a sound like rain began to fall inside the house, not from the roof. From the plumbing, and then, remarkably, from the walls themselves. A wet, persistent drip that spelled a rhythm, a Morse code of a domestic storm. I went from room to room and found the notes I had written page by page, pinned on walls in rooms I had never written in. My handwriting in loops, a page folded and displayed in the freezer, another taped to the inside of my wardrobe. On the last page there was a single line, not in my handwriting. "Thank you for remembering." Under that, the same voice I had fought with all along wrote a final offer. "Now, let us help you finish." The house had no language for mercy. It had only cataloging. But its offer, to finish, was a kindness of a sort. Finish what, exactly? I wasn't sure anymore whether what I had to finish was a sentence, a task, or an erasure. I thought about burning the pages and watched the smoke in slow motion. I considered running, getting into my car, into the highway, and just driving until my throat wasn't full of collected phrases from other people. Instead, I sat on the floor and listened. Confession would not stop it. It would simply supply the house with more material. The house was a collector, not a punisher. The only way to end this wasn't giving it documents but changing the pattern. Changing the pattern meant I had to stop reacting like a subject and start like an agent. The house thrived on reflexes. I panicked, it recorded. I hid, it hunted. I negotiated, it cataloged. To change the odds, I had to do something unpredictable, something a mirror couldn't reflect. I left the house. Not in the dramatic midnight rush of someone fleeing a monster, but in an ordinary move. I packed a bag with nothing sentimental, left a note that said, "Gone south for a few days," and drove into the night. I stopped at a motel where the walls were thin and unremarkable. I slept with the TV on a low hum and no windows. I thought distance might dull the thing, an ache softened by miles. I learned that refusal is its own kind of fuel. The house responded by going public. At midnight, the motel phone rang. The voice on the line was my grandmother's, crisp and dead. She read the names of people I hadn't seen in years, then asked, in a voice like a ledger, where I had gone. My room filled with the sound of my life being cataloged by the thing I had left behind. I switched off my phone. I unplugged the room. I wrapped my head in both hands and realized the house had learned me so well it could ping the world in my name. If it had access to my voice and records, it could reach across any distance. I had thought leaving would dissolve the problem. Instead, leaving made my absence a new resource for it to exploit. I drove back the next morning. The house sat in the street like a patient animal, all painted siding and waiting. I walked in and found the living room set up like a gallery. On the walls were framed pictures of me at different ages taken in angles I recognized, the childhood backyard. Polaroid now blown up to poster size, the rooftop photo in larger scale, the couch video freeze frame printed and framed like a portrait. In the center of the room was a chair with a recorder on the cushion. The recorder's screen blinked and a single line scrolled, "Thank you for coming back." I almost laughed, but it landed like a cough. I sat in the chair and the house exhaled around me like a tide. The record began, a montage of my voice, clipped and enunciated. "Tell me what happened," it said. "Tell me who you left. Tell me what you chose." I understood then that the house didn't want a paper confession. It wanted me to speak into its devices because speech is electric. Speech travels. It wanted me to narrate myself into a format it could store and replay. It had been sculpting a confession out of me all along. The last thing on the recorder was the question I had feared since I found the cassette. Who did you leave behind? I closed my mouth and opened it. I told the room everything. The nights, the stupid pact I made when I was 19, the person I left out of fear, and how that person's face pressed itself into the corners of my nights. The house listened. When I finished, it waited like a jury, then let out a sound that wasn't exactly a laugh, more a satisfied rustle. Something in me thawed, like ice from a jaw. Confessing felt like shampooing a stain, messy, necessary, and not entirely restorative. The house, true to its nature, cataloged it. The recorder clicked, saved, uploaded. A small red light winked, then blinked steady. After I confessed, what would it do with what I'd given it? I expected retribution, or at least a cruel twist, an escalation now that it had the meat it needed. I waited for videos of my confession to show up in places I couldn't control, for friends to get a file with my voice telling things best left secret. If the house was a thief, it was also a dealer. I expected it to trade my admissions. The next morning, nothing dramatic happened. My friends didn't get emails. My phone inbox didn't explode. The landlord didn't knock. The framed photos in the living room stayed unflinching on the walls. For a while, I thought I had misread it all. Perhaps the house was only a mirror and had no appetite beyond reflection. Then I found the Polaroid I had opened in the Crawlspace propped in my kitchen with a new scrawl across the bottom. "You did well. Now help me." Under it, the cassette, the one I had played, had been cut and rewired. Inside the tape casing was a loop, not of my voice, but of silence. A single bell rang when I touched it. I understood then that the house's interest had changed. It no longer sought confession for art. It sought collaboration. For weeks, it nudged me into small tasks that seemed arbitrary and then meaningful. Put a book on the third shelf, unscrew a loose lath in the attic, open a window, and leave it a crack. Each action felt like part of a puzzle I wasn't sure I wanted to be completing. The house rewarded me with silence when I complied, and with louder mimicry when I resisted. It became a negotiation. Do this, and we will quiet down. Don't, and we will catalog the rest of your life in public. It was a slow, corrosive barter. Finally, late one night, the house produced the phrase that made something deep in my chest turn. "You owe me a person." The words were not malicious. They were bureaucratic, as if filing for a favor. I understood the grammar of it. In exchange for the peace I was buying, the house had asked for someone I had once abandoned. I wanted to refuse, to walk away and let the hunger rise until the thing that fed on me burned out. But people don't always get the morality they want. They get the choices they accept. I dragged the box of things from the Crawlspace and, with hands that trembled with a mix of disgust and duty, I carried it to the chair in the living room. I set the tape and the Polaroid together on the table. I sat and listened as the house played my life back in a looped montage. The childish laughter, the moment of fleeing, the face I had left behind blurred as if in motion. For a moment I felt like a curator of my own destruction. In that moment, I made a decision. I took the Polaroid and I set it on the recorder. I put my face close to it and I said, plain and soft, "I am sorry." The house, that collector of things, played back my sorrow as if it were a finished artifact. The sound rolled into the walls and then, quietly, the pictures on the walls began to fade. Not all at once, but like an old film in sunlight, they paled and then turned blank. The framed couch photo verified and then erased itself. Silence followed. It used what I gave it to exact a trade. Confession was a currency. My words bought the house's quiet, but the price was that I had to give up the part of myself I'd once abandoned, a relinquishment rather than a punishment. The house went quiet for a long time after that, an almost healthy silence the way a fever finally breaks. I kept my head low, my routine simple, as if not attracting the house's attention might keep me in its good graces. It was tentative peace. Sometimes at night I would hear a soft shuffle and think the thing had returned, but it would pass like wind. Months later, the landlord knocked with the lemon cake again. He came bearing a check and a note. "Your lease has been cleared for renewal." He smiled like a man who had witnessed the slow restoration of something and had no interest in looking too closely. I am telling you this now because the mind likes to ask questions, because what I experienced changed something about the way I hold secrets. It taught me the arithmetic of small choices. Take one thing and something else goes with it. The house taught me that silence is not a refuge but a ledger. People ask me sometimes because they are curious or because they need to feel that other people have also been tested, whether I am sure it's gone. They ask in a voice threaded with hope and skepticism. Did it stop? I can answer honestly, it stopped doing what it had been doing. The calls ceased. The videos stopped appearing on my devices. The framed photographs retreated back to ordinary frames with ordinary images inside. The recorder stopped blinking red. But there are other things, smaller and more stubborn. Once, late after a thunderstorm, I found a single Polaroid propped on my pillow. It was of me asleep, mouth open, blanket thrown. Someone, something, had the means to document me still. On the back, scrawled with a finger, were 2 words. Keep choosing. I keep choosing. I am careful now. I listen to my voice the way you might listen for a cough that indicates something else. I keep a list of what I will never let go of, the names of people who deserve telling, the faces I cannot erase. I know that the house is patient, patience is its tool. And I know that the last trick it played on me was to teach me the value of memory. Not to hold everything, but to choose which things to save fiercely. If you ask me whether I forgive my younger self, the child who locked something away, I will say yes in a way that is both true and incomplete. Forgiveness here is not absolution. It's a way to stop the house from needing to clean my life for me. So if you ever wake in the night to your own voice calling you from the dark, if your phone rings, and your voicemail plays back your secrets with friendly detachment, know this: the sound of your voice matters. Keep it close. Choose your memories like you're choosing a lifeboat. Lock the door, but know the house can learn your handwriting. Do not mistake silence for safety. And if, in the quiet, you find a Polaroid of yourself you don't remember taking, put it in a box with a pack of matches and burn it outside. Watch the paper curl. Watch the black edge. Remember, the thing that watches you is learning how to catalog you. Teach it instead to forget.